We are looking at the new Ari Aster film, Beau is Afraid. Came out this weekend. Anyways, we're going to start with Zach on this.
Well,
Zach, you're the one that was championing us going to see Beau is Afraid. So you're starting out.
Beau is Afraid is the new film by Ari Aster. I believe we reviewed Midsommar, his last film, which I think got thrice approved. We're all a fan of that. And Beau is Afraid stars Joaquin Phoenix as Beau Wasserman, who at the beginning of the movie is a very afraid person living in his apartment. The world around him is a pretty scary place. He lives in some sort of urban area that feels a little bit like a David Cronenberg movie. It's got weird signage and people doing strange things in the streets. And there's a naked guy assaulting people, and his neighbors tell him to turn down his music, but he's not playing any music. The first 30 minutes of this movie is like a laundry list of every single irrational fear that you can have. Like, there's a spider, there's someone who's in the bathroom, there's, he has to take medicine, but he doesn't have water, so he's afraid that he's going to die, missing a
with
flight.
a little sex in it.
Well, I think that comes actually in the last 30 minutes of the movie, not to spoil anything, but there is a little sex in it a little later. Anyway, this movie kind of is like in 4 acts. You could sort of say there's like the beginning part where Beau's in his apartment. He gets a call that his mom has unfortunately passed away. She gets decapitated, which is like an Ari Aster trademark, I guess. Along the way, the second act of the movie, he meets a couple played by Nathan Lane and Amy Ryan. They kind of nurse him back to health after an injury. The third act, he kind of stumbles upon this theater troupe. And the fourth act is where he actually has a confrontation with his family or members of his family. Ari Aster is I think a really talented filmmaker. I was not a huge fan of Hereditary, but I really did like Midsommar, and he's certainly got this lane that he has where we know 2 things about him, really, because he doesn't talk about his movies very much, but there are 2 things that are very clear. Number one is that he likes this idea of horror as comedy. Like, for example, the last kind of climactic sequence in Midsommar is like pretty hilarious if you watch it. And he also is a big fan of rom-coms of the 80s, and in particular, Albert Brooks. And when I was watching this movie, I thought about Albert Brooks, particularly Albert Brooks's movie Mother with Debbie Reynolds, and then Defending Your Life with Albert Brooks and Meryl Streep. For some reason, he just thinks Albert Brooks is wonderful. I've mentioned on this podcast that I kind of hate Albert Brooks, but I respect Ari Aster's, curious love for him. I said on Twitter that this movie is a mixture of Albert Brooks's mother and Darren Aronofsky's mother. And needless to say, this movie is very much about mothers. Patti LuPone plays Beau's mother, Joaquin Phoenix's mother in this movie. And it's a very, loud performance. It's an interesting movie. When I walked out of this movie, I had really mixed feelings about it. I really liked the first act of this movie. I like weird, quirky, anxiety-ridden characters. We're all fans of Uncut Gems on this podcast. I'm not saying this movie is anywhere as good as Uncut Gems, but it has that sort of like just kinetic vibe where you're not sure what's really happening. You don't know in the first 30 or 45 minutes what's real or what's imagined. This could all just be one big long drug trip, like the people in my theater were apparently having. And then the movie kind of takes a turn a little bit when it reaches that third act with the theater troupe. It becomes a lot slower and much more of a character study about Beau, not so much his surroundings, but more kind of his internal state of mind. When I walked out of this movie, I was going to give it thumbs down because I was pretty disappointed by the last act of this movie. I felt as though it had a really cool concept and idea that Ari Aster just sort of gave up on midway through. And the last act of the movie, I don't think it really works. It's strange. It's kind of indulgent. There is a really cool sequence with Parker Posey that I guess I like, but it's kind of out of nowhere. It's almost like this guy was running out of ideas, which is not good for a 3-hour movie. But I'm going to give it a thumbs up because I think, in the words of Hannibal Lecter, when he's talking to Clarice Starling about why he's not going to kill her, the world is a better place with Beau is Afraid in it than not. This is a movie that is divisive, polarizing, and you know what? It's a little bit like Babylon. A24 gave this guy $35 million to make a movie that is going to be totally, I guess, divisive for audiences, and it's a movie that is totally incomprehensible on many levels. And I like it for that reason. I've read critics who have loved this movie and I've agreed with them. And I've read critics who have hated this movie and I agree with them. And it's the kind of movie that, you know what, if cinema's dying, let's at least have movies that we can talk about and think about and maybe not quite understand, but at least admire the skill and the technical precision with it, because this movie has some images and some ideas that are truly fascinating and different and bizarre. And I was on board with it for most of the time. I was never bored. I guess I didn't really mind the 3-hour running length, but I wish that someone had. I wish he had opted to focus more on the kind of moods of the first part of the movie rather than the indulgence of the mother-son relationship in the second part of the movie. But I guess he had to end the movie some way. So I'm giving it a reluctant 3 stars, and I'm really, really curious to see what you guys think about it.
First off, this is a terrible title. Like, I liked it when it was called Disappointment Boulevard before,
much better title. I agree.
Which is more interesting and more indicative of the movie. But the Joaquin Phoenix absolutely does his thing. He acts all over the place. He's a little out of touch at times, but he's dialing it up to 11 the entire movie. I see almost no scenario where he's not nominated for Best Actor this year. But there's a version of this movie that would be something like Ben Stiller or something, but it would have made it worse. Like, Phoenix makes the movie what it is, for like better or worse. The movie reminded me of several other movies. Synecdoche, New York, and The Fountain, I think, are its closest relatives. They're similarly like disastrous, epic spectacles with varying degrees of success. The difference is those movies are made by geniuses. This is made by kind of a wannabe. I remember giving Midsommar a thumbs up, and I'm kind of questioning that decision. There's a little bit of Inland Empire in this absurdly long genreless passion project that is never boring, but it's absolutely incomprehensible. And like Zach said, Mother, I also thought of Noah. I guess Ari Aster is just like a discount Aronofsky. Apparently it's 3 of his movies. I really like the young girl that's just popping pills the whole time. Like, she's from Yellowstone. She was fun to see. And Jeeves and the Naked Stabbing Man were quirky characters I kind of liked. The Stabber reminded me of the homeless dude in Superbad. You know, McMuffin.
Oh, that's a great call.
I actually kind of thought it was that guy. It took till the second time seeing him that I realized it wasn't. To the point that I understand what was going on in this movie, I really didn't care. It is an epic failure on all levels. It really, really reminded me of Everything Everywhere All at Once, in which it can't really decide on a genre. It shows all this bullshit on screen, wants you to analyze it and feel smart and see meaning and relatability in a story that's buried in all this garbage. This is absolutely the front runner for Best Picture. It has to be now, and in post Everything Everywhere winning world. And all the same clowns that anointed that movie they're doing this exact same thing with this movie. I'm giving it 1 star. And I never want to watch this again.
See, that's the enthusiasm we need. We need passion on this podcast. We need more 1 stars. I like it because I don't disagree with a lot of what you said, especially in the second half. I thought it was incredibly indulgent and just kind of throwing shit out there. I would be shocked if this movie gets any Oscar nominations.
No, I mean, this is a total Best Actor nominee. Like, it's almost a lock at this point, I think. Like, he is the most acting I've ever seen someone do.
I mean, Everything Everywhere was an A24 movie last April that I don't think any of us thought really had much of an Oscar chance. So it's not impossible.
Honestly, I got to say first, Todd said this is the most acting he's ever seen someone do. I thought he did even more acting in it because Todd and I were texting like a couple hours ago and we're like, we don't have a spotlight segment. What should we do? And I said, we could do like a best uses of de-aging. And he's like, there's no de-aging in. I'm like, wait. Joaquin isn't de-aged into the little kid. He's like, no, that's an actual kid actor, but he does kind of look fake because it looked like, and like the poster even sets it up as like it's all him. Anyways, the movie I thought of most when I was watching it was Inland Empire, and I remember Zach, you and I going to see Inland Empire with a few other friends at Cinema 21 here in Portland. And I remember one of them, as we were walking out, just looked at us and said, "What the hell was that?" And that's kind of how I was looking at this. It's one of those movies where you just have to stop trying to look for the meaning and just enjoy the ride. And how well you can do that is going to determine how well you like the movie. And for me, I had a blast turning off my brain and just going along for this crazy ride of not knowing what exactly was going on, but I was fascinated the entire time. This is a 3.5-star movie for me. I thought it was enthralling. It it was one of those that you just couldn't look away, even if you had no idea what was going on. Like, and for especially the final act, as everything is unfolding, my jaw was just dropped. Like, what the hell is going on? But I didn't really care at that point because I'd been along for this ride with Beau for so long and seen everything he had been through, and I'm like, this is insane, and I kind of love it. I don't need to know exactly what's going on, and I think David Lynch is a perfect example of that, because you can enjoy his movies on one level without ever knowing exactly what they mean, and just enjoy the filmmaking, enjoy the performances, and enjoy the ride he's taking you on. And then eventually maybe you might figure out what the rest of it is supposed to be. But yeah, Beau was afraid. I had so much fun. I was in a crowd that was having a lot of fun with it too. A lot of moments of laughter, which is not what you'd expect from an Ari Aster movie, especially after his first two. But this was definitely his funniest movie, and yeah, it's this weird passion project that I don't think you're supposed to fully understand, and I think that's a good thing. And if you can get there, like I did, you're gonna love it. If you can't, and you just look at it like it's 3 hours of nonsense, then you're gonna hate it. But I don't know. For some reason, I was completely enthralled, and I dug it. And
And you thought the same about Everything Everywhere All at Once too, so that's what I'm saying. Is it going to win Best Picture, right?
This is a little more polarizing than Everything Everywhere was.
This movie doesn't have heart. I mean,
yeah.
This movie is actually the exact opposite of Everything Everywhere All at Once, showing the destructive nature of families and how they ruin other family members' lives. Like, I think the first 45 minutes of this movie is so crazy good. Like, it was a wonderful experience watching it. It was like, this guy is so talented as a filmmaker. You just want to know what crazy shit's going to happen next. And it doesn't matter if it has an explanation. Like, that's a good comp to say with David Lynch, because with David Lynch, when he's at his best, you don't really care if it makes sense or not. You're just kind of along for the ride, and you admire the technical audacity of it. But the problem, I think, in this movie is that someone told Ari Aster, or maybe he felt it internally, that he needed to explain things. And I think the explanation is not adequate. And it kind of abandons what was cool about the first part of this movie in the second part of the movie. I will say, with that said, the theater sequence is an amazing sequence to watch, even though it doesn't really gel with the first part of the movie. And it really reminded me, when I watched it, of Todd's favorite movie, The Red Shoes. Like, the movie just stops entirely and then just does this other crazy shit, like that, merging the theatrical with the real life. And I thought, at the very least, Todd would admire that. But I think it's a cool movie, and you're right, no one's ever going to totally understand it. But this is kind of where we are with A24 movies to some extent, and I like it. I mean, not everything needs a perfect, refined ending to be justified in its existence.
But this ending was bad. I mean,
it's pretty bad.
I mean, what is he trying to say? Like, he's implicating the audience in judging Beau too. I mean, what is he trying to say? It makes no sense. It was just, that was so stupid.
Yeah. I feel.
But at least we actually got Richard Kind on screen instead of Colin Farrell or someone else in a fat suit trying to look like Richard Kind, like we had all last year.